I think of my life as a unity of circles. Some are concentric, others overlap, but they all connect in some way. Sometimes the connections don't happen for years, but when they do, I marvel. As in a shimmering kaleidoscope, familiar patterns keep unfolding. I was born in Richmond, Virginia, on March 24, 1912, to Fanny Burroughs and James Height. My mother was over 40. I was, as some say, a second-life baby. So for me, she was never really young. Perhaps that's why I have always enjoyed being around older people. Even as a young child, I found it interesting to talk with them, and they seemed to enjoy me. They took me seriously because I took life seriously. I was shy, and I loved to get off by myself to read. I never enjoyed doing nothing. I always liked a challenge. If I was jumping rope, I wanted to go on to double dutch. My older sisters explained me by saying I was an old folks' child. My grandparents died long before I was born, so I knew little about them. But I'm told that my father's family was part Native American from North Carolina, and my mother's people were from Virginia. Both my parents had been twice widowed, and both had children from their previous marriages. I have known two of my father's children well, his daughters Golden and Minnie, and all my mother's children were very close to me. She had 3 by her first marriage, Willie, the oldest, Benny, and Jessie. In her second marriage, there was Josephine. My sister Antoinette and I were the 2 Heights. Although we were actually half-sisters to the rest, I always felt we were whole sisters and brothers. It seemed to me that I had come up in a large, loving family. Josephine had to look after me when I was small because Mama worked long hours as a nurse in a Negro hospital in Richmond. A friend of Josephine's also had the care of a younger sister, and Josephine used to tell how we 2 little ones always seemed to be in the way of our older sister's fun. So one day, they took us to a nearby bridge with the idea of simply dropping us out of sight into the James River. When they got to the bridge, they saw a neighbor coming toward them and made a beeline back home. Josephine often said she was glad they thought better of it. When I was 4 years old, we moved to Rankin, Pennsylvania, part of the Great Migration of Southern Negroes to the north. At the time of my birth, more than 3/4 of the black population of the United States was still providing cheap labor in rural areas in the South. Nearly 50 years after the Civil War, the ravages of slavery remained. But by 1916, that was beginning to change. Booming industry in places like Chicago, Detroit, and Pittsburgh drew great waves of Negroes, along with immigrants from Europe, to work in the mines, mills, and factories that promised a better life. Though our family had no relatives to receive us up north, my parents, like thousands of others, were willing to risk everything for a new start. As a building and painting contractor, my father knew that Pennsylvania would be much richer territory for him. It was a different story for my mother. While many northern hospitals admitted Negro patients, none would employ a Negro nurse, so she had to make do with household work. But she made that transition with a grace that was a wonderful example to me, and eventually, through her own ingenuity as a household worker and the relationship she established with her employers, she was able to put her nursing skills to use taking care of private patients. Rankin was a lucky choice. My parents had heard a great deal about the appalling living and working conditions that many were forced to endure in Philadelphia, New York, Chicago, and Detroit. Housing often was the worst kind of tenement, with more than one family crowded into a unit. What were called multiple dwellings were really just plain slums, usually owned by wealthy absentee landlords. Rankin was different. It was a small borough of Pittsburgh, nestled in the rolling hills along the Monongahela River. The lowland along the river made a perfect place for steel mills, as well as for the railroad.